President Teddy Roosevelt once said, "Human nature is the most important subject to understand if you want to be a leader." This year, I'll be working in the corporate world for the 15th year. There are many fascinating places in the world to observe the human nature, and, well, the corporate world is one of them. Have you ever had a boss whom you admired? What were the characteristics of that person? On the opposite end, have you ever had a boss who was, well, less than ideal? And what about you? Do you find yourself in self-limiting patterns at work? If so, I'm going to share with you today some of the subtle yet deep-rooted reasons to your behaviors. A few years ago, I was given the responsibility to head up a new business function within the company. I inherited a team of talented and wonderfully diverse team members. It didn't take me too long to read and embrace each member's behaviors and customize my management style to each of them. Because you see, that year I had studied psychologists John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth's The Attachment Theory. They said that basically how we function as adults really is a reflection of our early childhood experiences. We humans need safety. Safety means survival. So as soon as we enter the world, our instincts kick in and we quickly accumulate information to know how to acquire the attention of our primary caregiver. The higher our success rate, the higher our survival rate. In a corporate environment, line managers can take on the dynamic of a caregiver as we look after the well-being of our daily team members on a daily basis. So the attachment theory and the 4 styles in it help me to decode my team. Karen, she believes that relationships generally are positive, people are helpful, and she's quite comfortable with emotions and feel like relationships are quite satisfying overall. This is the attachment style of a secure attachment adult. Most likely, her parents in her childhood was responsive, emotionally attuned to her, and provided her a safe feeling. Sometimes, when the parents or the caregivers are critical, blaming, shaming, it can create an attachment style in the child that is called insecure avoidant. The child withdraws and shuts down emotionally as a self-protection mechanism because it hurts. As they become adults, they tend to become more stoic and have difficulty with intimacy. Sound familiar? Do you know people like that around you? Yeah, I can respect why Mark keeps to himself a lot. Sometimes when the caregiver is unpredictable, unreliable, and unavailable, the attachment style that tends to dwell in the child is called insecure anxious. The child is not so sure whether or not the parents are reliable in providing safety and protection. So, as a result, Polly's hypersensitivity to affirmation and validation really is a reflection of her early childhood experiences. I understand that, and I go the extra mile at work to provide her the reassurance emotionally when I can. Lastly, if the caretaker is frightening, chaotic, and disorganized, it will have a severe impact and develop in the child an attachment style called insecure disorganized. The child in high moments of distress will become chaotic and shut down and paralyzed because as humans, it's fight, flight, or freeze. Indeed, I later found out that Ben had a complex childhood. Research shows that from 0 to 18 months old, the infant's experience with our parents will generally crystallize into these 4 major attachment styles. And what is formed at 18 months old will influence our interpersonal relationships throughout our lifetime. My team, 4 unique talents, each had a very subconscious but clear and unique attachment style. Karen embodies, I trust you. Mark, quietly without words, expresses, I can't trust you because self-reliance is my protection. Polly, subtly, frequently searches, can I trust you? Ben, at times overwhelmed, doubts, can I trust myself? Karen, Mark, Polly, and Ben are not unique in our world. Research was able to estimate clusters percentages based on each attachment styles on entire populations. This is an example of the United States. Corporate research has shown that natural leaders tend to emerge most frequently from the secure attachment group because qualities such as authenticity, generosity, and empathy are most linked with motivational leadership styles. Leaders who know how to create a psychologically safe environment also inspires more productivity and proactivity in employees, and which feeds to the bottom line. This is a dynamic that is achieved by fulfilling secure attachment needs and not by transactional exchange. So you might say to me now, okay, Shirley, you've convinced me. Attachment style is important. But is it nature or is it nurture? Well, research shows that it's both. Our genetics are programmed by our ancestors' DNA, but our development is shaped and formed by our early childhood experiences. Now, the human brain is like a new iPhone. It's basically programmed, and as you speak into Siri, the algorithm evolves accordingly to the way you speak into the phone. And likewise, when we're born, our brains are programmed only genetically by neurons, but the limbic region, the area of our emotional seat and self are not fully connected at birth. Our caregivers activate this growth area in our brain by emotional transactions. This part is nature.
So every time you talk to and engage with a child, you are literally growing a brain, connecting the different parts of the brain, which allows for new ideas, insights, and creative thinking. So each moment of eye contact, each new word exchanged, each time you make a child laugh, you are strengthening these connections.
This is the world's first MRI scan of a mother kissing her child. Her kiss activated a burst of oxytocin in the baby's brain, a hormone that generates feelings of attachment, affection, and love. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Each time nourishing emotions like this are generated, it strengthens and builds our brain. In contrast, let me show you a brain scan from Texas Children's Hospital that shocked the neuroscience world. Both are 3-year-old brains. The one on the left was raised in a nourishing environment. The one on the right suffered severe emotional neglect. You can see on this brain scan that there is a visible shrinkage in brain size, there's more hollow areas on the brain, and the brain structure is much more blurrier than the healthy brain. This is a hard-hitting visual effect of how caregivers can affect and impact the development of a youngster's brain. Let's look further into older children. Here, what you see is a PET scan of 2 teenagers. On the left is a teenager's brain who is healthy and ordinary. On the right is a teenager's brain of the same age, but an orphan who was institutionalized in an orphanage since birth. You can see here there are much more empty and hollow areas, as well as the temporal lobes, which are the seats of emotion and senses, are almost not developed. A brain like this, when the child grows into an adult, will most likely suffer emotional and cognitive issues. And what about further into adulthood? Let me show you this shocking image of an ordinary adult and a psychopath. You can see, again, there's more hollow areas in the brain. In addition, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala are empty. The prefrontal cortex relates to empathy. The amygdala relates to fear and remorse. So the next time when you're watching Criminal Minds and CSI and you hear the words that describe the criminal villains' cold, empty stare and how their actions have no remorse, remember this brain scan. Very often, psychopaths comes from deeply traumatic childhoods. So, knowing all this, very objectively, does it change the way you look at personalities who are shaping our world today? And what about the pioneers who are leading our era? What do you think are their attachment styles? And closer to home, does it change the way that you relate to your teams on a daily basis? And what about your loved ones at home? So if you're feeling vaguely horrified by now, don't. Let me digest the 2 takeaways for you. If our psychological attachment style is formed at 18 months old, and 90% of our brain is developed by 5 years old, does that mean we're doomed for the rest of our lives as adults until we die? You'll be glad to hear, not necessarily. Well, we can't change the foundation that's already formed by 5 years old, meaning even as well-regulated adults, under extreme pressure and distress, or when we're triggered enough, we will knee-jerk back to those early foundations. But there are 2 things that we can do to make a positive difference: self-awareness and deliberate life choices. First, self-awareness. Fortunately, the human brain has a biologically innate capacity to regenerate and create new circuitries in our brain with positive new experiences, meaning we can literally rewire our brain moment by moment, day by day, and create more positive, healthy, and resilient emotions. Remember the neurons that wire together, fire together? Remember the neurons that fire together, wire together? Research has shown that if we're able to stimulate the positive areas in our brain day after day, neuroplasticity changes. It's kind of like when people meditate and the positive behavioral changes they see when they meditate over time. We can't rewrite history, but literally, we can rewire our brain if we worked at it. 2, deliberate life choices. Human brains are social brains, and there's truth to the saying, we are on the average of the 5 people that we surround ourselves with. Research has shown that in a relationship, if a partner has a secure attachment style, the other less than secure attachment style partner can grow into earned secure attachment in 3 to 5 years. How's that? It's not all doom and gloom. So perspective is a very funny thing. It's like this real-life picture of Prince William. Does Prince William want to leave the UK too? Well, no. He was picking up the lovely Kate and their son from the hospital and saying that now he has 3 kids, thrice the worry, so calm down, people. So I'm not saying that psychology and neuroscience is the only way to gain insight into people and to become better leaders, but I do believe that there are many, many good ways for us to gain insight into the complex human nature. Leveraging science and proven frameworks that make sense to our personal logic and to apply them to find better, more effective ways to become a good leader is no different to learning a new language or taking up a new sport. Practice makes kind of perfect. Now, I have a confession to make. Karen, Mark, Polly, and Ben are real people that I've met in different times in my career. But the story itself is a fictional one in order to illustrate for all of you the 4 attachment styles in 4 neat boxes. But now I do want to share with you a real-life story. People who know me knows that one of my biggest joys in my corporate life is building teams and mentoring young talents. So I told some of my former and current line direct reports and mentees that I was writing this TEDx talk on psychology in leadership. I asked them to share with me what they appreciated in our relationship. And here are their responses. I've highlighted for you in green the areas where they probably didn't realize, areas that made a description of where their psychological attachment need was met. These young talents, as you can see, are from different ethnicities and different nationalities. Yet the number one recurring theme here and the recurring sentence was humanly universal. A safe space where they felt seen, heard, and understood in order to thrive. I don't have children yet, but I imagine that management is a little bit like parenting. In my career, sleepless nights has always been about people, not the stock price. And just like parenting, when you see the people under your wings evolve and thrive, I burst with incredible pride and joy. In that moment, everything is worth it. I hope that by hearing my story on psychology, that it might inspire you as well to find joy in psychology at work. And may we become better leaders for those of ourselves and those around us. Thank you.